everyone. So welcome to the first thing you need to know about loneliness. Welcome to the first thing you need to know about loneliness. As I said, in this series, I'm going to be sharing 5 things you need to know about loneliness. And today, I'm talking about the root of loneliness. Yes, the root of loneliness. Where is loneliness all about? You see, loneliness is not the absence of people or things. Loneliness is not the presence of people or things. You can be with people, you can be with friends, but you are still lonely. And so somebody once said that the worst thing in this life is not to be alone, but the worst thing in this life is to be surrounded by people that makes you feel all alone. And so loneliness is not dependent on your external environment. The root of loneliness is rooted deep on the inside of us. Loneliness doesn't come because you of the family you are born with or because you don't have friends. The root of loneliness is truly deep in your heart. And I'm so thrilled to be sharing that with you today. And now the Britannical Online Dictionary defines loneliness as a distressing experience that occurs when a person's social relationships are perceived by that person to be less in quantity and especially in quality than desired. So loneliness is based on the perception of a person. When a person feels that their relationship is not in quality and quantity, then loneliness begins to arise on the inside of that person. But where is loneliness really coming about? Loneliness is coming from our early childhood. Every one of us, when we were babies, when we were born, we had this deep trust and connection with our parents. Every child that comes into the world has this deep trust and connection with the parents. There is this connection that brings identity and that brings reassurance and comfort to that child. Now, when a baby does not experience that comfort, when the baby does not experience that trust in the parents or the caregiver, then it begins to lead to loneliness. And so none of us was born lonely. We were all made to be lonely by the things that happened in our early childhoods. That's something that I didn't know about myself. I thought that probably I was lonely because I didn't have a girlfriend, or probably because of my family and all of that. But I came to discover that the root of loneliness was not because of all of these external things. It went from the beginning, from when I was a child. And when I recalled my early childhood, I discovered that as a child, I didn't really have a strong connection with my parents. As a child, I did not have a strong bond and connection with my parents. And because of that, I had this sense of insecurity that began to build on the inside of me. And this insecurity developed over time and over life. And over a period of time, it developed into full-blown loneliness. And so if there is somebody that is suffering from a deep sense of loneliness, it didn't happen now. That loneliness happened while you were a baby. And I can prove to you that if you're suffering from loneliness right now, there is a high probability that you do not have a strong connection with your parents or with your caregivers. That is why statistics have shown that many people who suffer from loneliness are people who came from homes that had absentee parents. It could be father or mother, or did not have guidance that were there. Probably you grew up in a home with your father and mother, but did you really have a strong connection with your father and mother? Did you feel secure and safe in that connection? Now that's a question that only you can answer. But for my case, as I began to look at my life and began to look at while I was so lonely, I discovered that the root was my connection with my parents. And so how did this thing come about? If every one of us comes into this world trusting and depending with our parents, how did loneliness develop on the inside of me? How did loneliness develop in your inside? And so we're talking about right now the stages of loneliness. You see, loneliness did not just happen by mistake. It did not just happen by mistake. Loneliness happened over time. You developed it. Loneliness is almost like a character, an attribute, a behavior that is developed by practice. And so when a baby or a newborn baby or a toddler, when a baby discovers that he or she doesn't have connection with the parents, the first stage that happens is what I call the protest stage. And what is the protest stage? This is when the baby begins to cry and the baby begins to knock around and begins to do things around to try to get attention from the parents. Every one of you have probably seen a hungry child, a baby that is hungry and that really wants to eat. You find the baby nagging and screaming and crying. Why is the baby doing that? The baby is trying to re-establish trust and connection with the parents. And so every one of us, before we came to the place of full-blown loneliness, we went through the protest stage where we express our desire for connection. Probably you went to your mom and you spoke to your dad and you really wanted to connect to your dad, but your dad did not give you that connection. Your mom did not give you that connection. You protested, you threw tantrums, and you did a lot of things, yet that connection was not given. And so when a child or a baby protests because of lack of love and connection, and if the caregiver doesn't give that connection, the baby goes to the second stage. And what is the second stage? The second stage is what I call despair. And during the despair stage, during this despair stage, the baby becomes gloomy, the baby becomes down. It's just like a newborn baby or a little child. If a little child asks for food and food is not given, after a period of time, that little child just stops asking. Even happens in babies, or the baby stops crying. The baby gets into a despair stage. In this despair stage, the baby begins to learn to live independent of the parents. In this despair stage, the baby begins to learn, I can't trust my father, I can't trust my mother, I can't trust my caregiver. In this despair stage, the baby begins to build an independent personality, a personality that is not dependent on the parents. The baby begins to develop strategies and ways to survive independent of the caregiver, and that is a despair stage. And surely full of a lot of depression. That's why you can see little babies, they are looking very depressed. They don't play, they are usually very quiet. In my case, when I was going through the despair stage, I was very quiet. When I was growing up, a lot of people thought I was a quiet child because I was very quiet, because I didn't have the strength to protest again. I was tired of protesting, so I just became quiet. So the third stage of loneliness is what I call the alone stage. And in the alone stage, this is when the child completely detaches from the caregiver. This is when the child learns to live independently from the parents and independently from the caregiver. And usually it happens, and when a child goes into this alone stage, there are two major things that can happen to this child. The child could either could become very aggressive or could become very, very passive. So this is when you find children becoming very stubborn or very heady. They become very aggressive, very disrespectful. This is when they become nonchalant. They don't care about anyone. They want to do things by themselves. This is when children they begin to form bad company. They begin to go out and do things by themselves, or they become very promiscuous in their behavior. Or the other effect of aloneness is that the child becomes very passive. The child becomes very quiet. The child just always sits quiet. You never know what the child is thinking about. You never know if the child is angry or sad. The child basically has shut all of his emotion and pushed it on the inside, because this child doesn't have the ability to connect to his caregivers and to connect with other people. And this is who I am. I was that kind of child. I was a passive kind of child. This is how the aloneness stage affected me. I became very passive. I became very quiet. I would not talk to people. I became very shy. People would not know my thoughts because I was afraid of expressing my mind and what I felt, because I always felt misunderstood. I felt I would not be understood when I expressed my thoughts and my mind. And so what stage are you in this process? What stage are you? Are you in the protest stage? Are you in the despair stage? Or are you in full-blown aloneness and lonely stage? I was in full-blown loneliness, and I got help. God helped me with some principles, and I want to help you with some principles. And so I want you to watch out for the second session. And the second session, I'll be talking about just the signs and symptoms of loneliness. And I'm sure by the time you learn about some of the signs and symptoms, your knowledge about loneliness is going to become even much more deeper and profound. So thank you so much for listening to this first video. I want to encourage you to share. I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I want to encourage you to watch out for the next video that will be coming, where I'll be talking about the signs and symptoms of loneliness. If this has taught you, if this has blessed you and impacted you, please let me know. I would love to get your feedback about how this session has blessed your life. Thank you so much. You're welcome.